Good morning and welcome to Beachside Community Church Online. My name is Jonathan and I get to work with our students here at Beachside, and I love to work with our students. I love my job and I love getting to spend time with them. I miss them and I'm super ready to get back together with them, hopefully in the not too distant future. If you are here with us for the first time, we want you to know that we believe that 2,000 years ago there was a guy named Jesus who lived and breathed and walked. He was a real human being, just like you and I are human beings. He came to bring God's kingdom with him. He was eventually arrested by Rome. He was murdered by Rome. He came back to life 3 days later, and then he appeared to over 500 people in close proximity to the city of Jerusalem. And because of that, we believe that Jesus is worth following. If you've been tracking with us over the last couple weeks, you know that we really began to look at what does it look like for us to leverage this season that we're in to become better humans on the other side of it. Last week, Andy asked us the question, what does it look like for us to pray, God, use this season until you choose to remove this season? When I heard Andy say that, I got really excited because I began to wonder, how can I use this season? I love to set goals and I love to think about tasks that I can accomplish. I'm a very goal-oriented person. And so when quarantine was coming and I knew that it was around the corner, just to be completely honest, one of the first things I thought was, oh my gosh, what can I accomplish during this season where I'm going to be quarantined at home? Life isn't going to be as busy. I'm not going to be in the office as much. We're not going to be doing, church on Sunday mornings as like we were doing that. What can I accomplish in this season that I might not have had time for beforehand? And so I began to set goals. And as I began to think about goals and think about what goals look like, I began to wonder, do we set goals for our life? Do we set goals for kind of the meta narrative of our life? When we kind of think about the future, do we think back on our lives and go, hey, there are a couple things that I wish would be true about who I am as a person? And I think one of those things that we want to be true about who we are is that we all want to be accepted, right? Like we all want to be able to say that we have friends, that we found community, that there are people who like us for who we are, the people that like us because of the things in common that we have. They like us because of the things that we like. Like I don't think there's a lot of people who wake up and go, hey, I can't wait to be alone for the rest of my life. And I think, that's part of the reason why it causes us sadness, when we see our friends post something on social media that we weren't invited to. We feel sad over that because we want to feel accepted. I think another thing that we all want to feel is we all want to be successful. I think there's a lot of different ways to define success in our lives. It could certainly be the amount of money we make or the things that we own, the house that we live in, the job that we have, to be able to get the promotion. We want to be able to kind of think about our lives and go, hey, I was successful during my time here on the earth. And again, I don't think any of us wake up tomorrow morning and go, man, I can't wait to be a failure today. I don't think anyone has said that at any point in their lives. And I think we all want to have, purpose as well. I think we all want to find meaning in our lives. We all want to have purpose. We don't want to kind of wake up to this meaningless existence or where we just kind of go through the motions and nothing has any purpose. We want to make a difference in the world around us. We want to cause change and we want to create good things, and we want people to go, man, that person did a lot and it was meaningful while we were here. Nobody wants to waste their life, And I think a lot of us, we all want to have good relationships. I think that's a goal for a lot of us, is we want to have great relationships, whether that's, with our spouse or whether that's with our friends or whether that's with our peers at work, is we want to have good, strong relationships. We want to have community. We want to be able to kind of look around and go, man, things are going well in my friendships. And that's why I think a lot of us find this particular season difficult. I think we have found good friends. A lot of us do have good friends, and being alone in this season is hard for a lot of us. I think we also all kind of want to have experiences in our life. I remember when I was, so I think I was in fourth grade, my dad checked me out of school to take me to a Braves game. That's an experience that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And that was really awesome. And I think we all want to have these experiences as well that we can kind of reflect back on and think about how fun that was, or how awesome that was, or how meaningful that was. We take vacations and we go on cruises and we do all these things because we want to have experiences in our lives. And I think for a lot of us, we all want to believe in something. We all want to have faith. And I totally understand that there's perhaps some of you this morning who are watching who you're just kind of on the fringes of church and maybe you don't believe in the things that we believe. But I still think that there's something inside of us that wants to believe in something bigger than ourselves. We want to believe that maybe there is a man upstairs who is there, who is working things out. And, or even if, we're not to that phase yet, we still want to believe that there's goodness in the world. We want to believe that there's some kind of a moral ethic or a social responsibility that we all have. And for our conversation today, I'm just kind of going to take all of those things and say, we all want to have faith. We all want to have faith in something. And that's where we as a church come in. I think, you're here this morning because you either have faith or you have questions about faith or you're curious about faith. And so what we want to do as a church is we want to help people grow in their faith, and we want to help you develop a faith of your own. Actually, in the hallway right behind me, there is a banner that hangs on the wall for our students that says, developing a faith of your own. And that's what we want. And that's what we want for our students. And that's what we want for you this morning as well, to really begin to develop this faith that you can own, that's personal to you, that's real to you. And as I was thinking about this morning, and as I was thinking about faith, I really began to ask the question, what is faith? What is faith exactly? You see, I think a lot of us use faith as kind of this stopgap in our knowledge, right? When we don't have all the answers, we just kind of tell people, well, you just have to have faith. I mean, think about the current debate in our culture right now between science and faith. You see, science is kind of the belief because of facts, and faith kind of becomes the belief in the absence of facts. I mean, think about the beginning of our Bibles and the creation story in Genesis chapter 1. You see, a lot of us, we kind of read that, and science says there's no way that it's possible that the world was created like the Bible said that it was created. And then, we read the Bible and go, of course, that's how God created the world because the Bible said, and we just have to have faith that those things happen. But the logical kind of question that comes next is, what happens when our knowledge begins to grow? Well, the only thing that can happen to our faith is our faith that kind of begins to get smaller. If we use faith as a stopgap for our absence of knowledge, when our knowledge grows, our faith gets smaller. And I think so for some of us, we use faith as we're not really sure what to say, or we're not really sure what to do next. I think that there are some of us who, we've been praying for someone in our family who's been sick for a long time, or we've been praying for that promotion, or we've been praying for that new job, or we've been praying for that relationship, that it'll fix itself, or that it'll get better, or that girl will notice us. And then we kind of just tell people, well, man, you just have to have faith. Like, you just got to have faith that something good is going to happen in your life, or you've got to have faith that God's going to do something for your sick grandparent or whatever it may be. When I was growing up, I would always read that story where Jesus talks about how, faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And I remember hearing that and going like, if faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain, how small is my faith if I can't simply get an A on a test that I studied for? And I think what happens is we begin to question and we begin to see faith as a means to get God to do something for us. And obviously that begins to cause us problems when God doesn't do the thing that we need him to do. And in that moment, our faith kind of feels like it's getting the rug pulled out from underneath it. I would even begin to imagine that there's some of you here today who are watching this and you've walked away from faith because you've had a belief that faith means that God's going to do something on your behalf. Or faith is something that is a stopgap in your knowledge, but then your knowledge has grown. You've become smarter, and all of a sudden your faith has gotten smaller. You see, I think that there's probably a lot of us who have walked away from our faith because we had a wrong view of what faith actually is. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to really break down what it means for us to have faith. And here's the deal. I believe that this is incredibly important. And I believe that it's incredibly important that we get this right. And parents, if you're in the room and you're watching this and you're thinking about your kids, it's incredibly important for you to get the concept of faith correct, because the faith of the next generation is dependent on the idea that you get the idea of faith right. You see, I tell our students all the time that I believe that they are going to create the future that we're going to live in. And we need students who have great faith to create a great future that we're going to live in. And it is incredibly important that we get the idea of faith right. And for that, we're going to turn to the book of Hebrews this morning. Hebrews was actually written as a sermon to a group of people in the city of Jerusalem, to Christians in Jerusalem. It's actually kind of written as a sermon to encourage those people to not give up their faith. That when life gets difficult and things get tricky and circumstances are hard, that we have to hold on to our faith. There's actually scholarship that would tell us that a woman wrote Hebrews, or at the very least read Hebrews the first time it was presented to a group of people. And I think that's awesome. And I think that's super encouraging. And I think it should be super encouraging to you women listening this morning. We need your voices in our communities and in our schools and in our churches. We need your wisdom. And so the book of Hebrews was written to this group of people, and it was written to this group of people who are struggling in their faith. They're beginning to think maybe following Jesus isn't worth it because life is getting difficult. And we know that this sermon was written between 60 and 70 AD. And we also know that during that time, Josephus, the historian, tells us that James, the brother of Jesus, was stoned by the Sanhedrin in 65 AD. So that's kind of the cultural climate that these Christians are living in during the time that this sermon was written to this group of people that we now call Hebrews. Life is super difficult for them. And this message is meant to encourage them to keep on, to continue to hold on to their faith. In Hebrews chapter 11, the writer of Hebrews gives us an idea of what faith is. This is in Hebrews chapter 11. This is verse 1. If you have a Bible or if you want to pull out your phone and read along with me. And this is what they say. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. You see, this word assurance, now faith is the assurance, is actually a super fascinating word in the Greek. It's this Greek word called hypostasis. And you might have heard of this word before if you kind of work in a medical profession. If you haven't heard of it, I'm going to leave the Googling up to you because it's kind of a weird medical condition. But at the time that Hebrews was written, hypostasis was kind of emerging as this Greek philosophical concept that has a lot of meaning for what we're talking about today. Hypostasis is also two Greek words that are kind of mashed together. The first word is hupo, which is the preposition under. The second word is this word histemi, which is the prolonged verb to stand, or it means that we can stand for a long time. And what the grammar tells us is that when these two words are used together, the one thing becomes the means to the other. And so what the author is telling us is that faith is the thing that's underneath us, which is allowing us to stand. And if we're reading the verse correctly, it's allowing us to stand for a long time. Faith is the thing that is underneath us, giving us the ability to continue to stand even when life gets difficult. And what's more, this word was kind of emerging as this important Greek philosophical concept. And it's this idea that there is a fundamental reality that is perhaps more true than all other things. It's this idea that something is more true and then all other true things are built on top of it. I mean, think about it like the foundation of a house. We all know that the foundation of a house is super important. If the foundation is uneven, the house won't be built well. If the foundation is not built well in the first place, the house is probably going to have a tough time when the hurricane rolls through. If the foundation gets a crack in it, we know that a lot of times those houses are condemned as not being livable, or it requires a lot of money to fix those things. You see, the author of Hebrews is telling us is that faith is the foundation that the rest of our lives are built on. And I would imagine that that might not be true for all of us. As we think about this dresser, and we've got these different compartments and we've got these different drawers for our life, for a lot of us, faith is just a drawer in our life. But what the writer of Hebrews is telling us, that perhaps faith just isn't a drawer in our life, but that faith is the dresser that the rest of our life should fit inside of. I mean, think about it for a second. I mean, what happens if we put too much stock in one of these drawers, right? If one of these things becomes bigger than the other, then what happens when that drawer gets pulled out from underneath us? I mean, think about success for a second. Think about that job that you really want, that you're really hoping for, that you really need, and you begin to put so much of yourself in that job. You get that job and things are going well, and then all of a sudden you get called into your boss's office and you get fired. What happens to your life if you've built too much of your life on top of that job? You see, this happened to me actually a few years ago. Before I moved down to Fort Walton Beach, I was working at a church in Colorado. I had gotten the job of being a student pastor at a real church in Colorado. And for whatever reason, I felt like I had just arrived. I had the job that I wanted. I was living in Colorado, literally at the base of the mountains. I mean, everything seemed perfect. And I just began to feel like I was that job. I had gone out west. I had conquered. I had gotten the job. I was the Lone Ranger who went out to the wild west. And my identity began to be wrapped up in this job. Well, I was there for a little over a year and a half, and I got the dreaded text message from my boss. It was a Sunday night, and he texted me and he said, "Hey, Jonathan, I need to see you in my office." And when I got that text message, right, like my stomach just dropped to the floor, and I knew what was coming. And sure enough, when I got into my boss's office the next morning, he said, "Jonathan, we just don't feel like you're a great fit on our staff team." And I was devastated. Like, I felt like I had failed. I felt miserable. I felt like my life had been pulled out from underneath me. And I began to wonder, was I good enough? Could I hack it? Had I failed? Had I chosen to go into the wrong career? What if I never got another opportunity? You see, life just became really, really difficult. And I would imagine for some of you watching this morning, there's a drawer in your dresser that's got a little bit too much stuff in it. And faith has become a small portion of our life, rather than faith being the foundation that the rest of our life is built on. The author of Hebrews continues, and in Hebrews chapter 11, he just lists this amazing catalog of the heroes of our faith, right? They did amazing things because they had faith. They left their homes, they fought wild animals, they stood up to tyranny and injustice. And it's just this really incredible list of people. And then he gets to chapter 12, and this is what he says. He says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses," and he's referring back to those people in chapter 11, he says, "let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." You see, what the author of Hebrews is telling us is that Jesus is the author and the perfecter of our faith, that Jesus is the builder of the foundation, that Jesus is the thing on which we stand. You see, faith is not a stopgap in our knowledge. Faith is not something we say when we don't know what to do. Faith is a person, and that person's name is Jesus. And when we begin to build our life on the person of Jesus, all of a sudden, all of these other things, this idea of being successful and having relationships and having meaning and purpose and having experiences, all of these things take on a completely different perspective. You see, when our job gets pulled out from underneath us, or our relationships kind of start to fall apart, or we don't get to have the experiences that we want to have, it's okay, because our foundation is not built on those things. Our foundation is built on the one who is the author and the perfecter of our faith. Our foundation is built on Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I would imagine that there's probably some of us in the room this morning that need to begin to shift our priorities, because our faith is being built on something other than the person of Jesus. Our faith is built on one of those things that I mentioned earlier. Perhaps it's built on something else for you this morning. When that thing gets pulled out from underneath you, life gets difficult. But when we begin to build our foundation on the person of Jesus, and we begin to view our life through the lens of faith, all of those things take on extreme significance, right? Our jobs become more than just a place where we get a paycheck. Our jobs become places where we get to affect change in our culture, and we get to spend time with people who aren't like us, where we get to show the light and the life and the love of Jesus to the people around us. Our relationship becomes means for community and means for places to cultivate our faith. Our experiences aren't things that where we go on vacation, but our experiences are when we choose to go on mission trips or choose to jump in an environment in our church and serve. And all of a sudden what we begin to realize is that our experiences are helping other people develop a faith of their own. And when those things happen, our faith grows and our faith changes, and they make us into different people. You see, we have to begin to view our lives through the lens of faith. We have got to begin to build our life on the foundation of Jesus. Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 7 that if we hear these words of his, it's like building our house on the rock. And I would imagine this morning that some of you might feel like, especially in this particular season, that your house is not necessarily built on the rock, that the ground underneath you is a little bit unsteady. And I would say that perhaps this morning, faith for you is a drawer in the dresser, and it's not the foundation that you've built your life on. You see, when we begin to build the foundation of our life on the person of Jesus, that becomes the time when we can stand up to face any trial that potentially comes our way. When the job falls apart, that's totally fine, because we can stand on the person of Jesus. Jesus becomes the means by which we stand in the face of rough relationships. Jesus becomes the means by which we stand when life shuts down and we get locked in our homes because of a virus that's spreading across the world. Jesus is the means by which we stand when the money runs out and the girlfriend leaves us and the job falls apart and we don't get to go on the vacation and we see injustice and tyranny around the world. Jesus is the means by which we stand in the face of all of those things. Imagine what it would look like the next time trouble comes your way, the next time life gets difficult, the next time that you are faced with a trial, that it feels like you are standing on unshakable ground. You see, when I was getting ready for this message, I came across this Instagram post from Jerry Jeudy, Alabama wide receiver at the time. He had posted this literally days after they had lost to LSU. And the caption of the post simply said, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future." And I don't know what the next couple months are going to look like for us as the world begins to reopen. And I don't know what the next year is going to look like for you. And I don't know what the next year is going to look like for me. Who knows? But what I do know is that Jesus is the strong and the firm foundation on which the rest of my life can be built. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at how do we begin to build a strong foundation of faith in the person of Jesus. So don't miss part 2, and we'll see you guys next week.